All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Buck the System. I'm your host, David West, and today we have a very, very fun episode in store. This is an episode I've wanted to do for several months now, but I wasn't able to do until I had this recording space finished, and then even after I did have it finished, it took a little while to get everything set up and prepped and learn OBS Studio well enough that I could actually do this. So what this episode is going to be is a response to an atheist review of one of my films. For those of you who don't know, a few years ago, I made a musical adaptation of The Pilgrim's Progress, the classic allegorical novel, for my old church. I've since moved, so I don't go to that church anymore, but I still love a lot of people at that church and think it's a wonderful place. So back in September, I went to go check the comments on the Pilgrim's Progress movie that I'd made on YouTube, as I often do. And I realized that there were some rather nasty comments in there. And I was like, wow, what's going on? And people were like, oh, are you here from GAM? Are you here from GAM? And I was like, what is this? And I Googled it and I realized, wow, someone did a review of my movie. So it was a podcast called God Awful Movies. It's an atheist podcast. Ran by a guy who does several other atheist podcasts, so I'm not just like assuming that he's an atheist. This is kind of his thing. At first I was very, very flattered and honored. I was like, wow, this should be fun. I love that kind of criticism where you go like make fun of bad movies and especially make fun of Christian movies. You know, I'm a huge fan of Say Goodnight Kevin. He's probably my favorite YouTuber. I'm also a big fan of Red Letter Media. They don't do necessarily Christian films, but they do review a lot of bad films and have a lot of fun commentary on that stuff. I don't really watch Cinema Snob except for his midnight movie reviews where he goes and watches movies. I at least watch the Christian ones that he does. He does a lot of those. He'll watch a usually terrible Christian movie and then go out into the parking lot with his wife or girlfriend or whatever, or whoever he went to see the movie with. And they will talk about it in their car and laugh about it. And those are usually pretty fun. So I enjoy those. So I'm no stranger at all to this kind of review. And so when I saw that someone had done one about one of my films, I wasn't like offended at all. I thought it was hilarious and I was really excited to watch it. And when I did watch it, there were some things about it that I was like, man, I'm totally going to have to be that filmmaker a little bit, but I got to respond to this. And you'll see why when I go through it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So just so you know, it will help if you've seen my Pilgrim's Progress film before you watch this, but it's not at all necessary. I'm going to provide enough context and clips as we go through it to make it make sense, even for those of you who haven't seen it. Now, one thing I do also want to warn people about is that if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, there is going to be a little bit of swearing in this podcast from the podcast that we're going over, the God Awful Movies podcast. And I'm not going to censor it because I just think that's kind of stupid. I don't like censorship and I don't really think there's any children listening to my show. I also want people to remember that this is all in good fun. I'm going to be busting these guys' balls a little bit, but don't take it too seriously. Don't think I'm just trying to be a jerk or that I'm butthurt because I'm really not. I truly am not that filmmaker. I'm not the kind of guy like my dearly departed frenemy, J. Neil Schulman, peace be upon him, who gets just very, very angry at people criticizing their films. I never thought that my first feature film was going to be a family-friendly musical. So, I'm not that offended by people making fun of the flaws in Pilgrim's Progress. It's a feature film that I made for about $2,500. So the fact that it's even being noticed by a podcast like this, which typically does reviews of much bigger films. Right before Pilgrim's Progress, they did Rocky 2, which seems to be a bit of an outlier budget-wise. That was a much more expensive film than they're usually doing. But a lot of the other films they've reviewed are much bigger Christian films that have at least, probably several $100,000 budgets, or Hallmark movies, which I think usually have budgets in the $2 million range. Not giant films by any stretch of the imagination, but this movie that we made cost, around $2,500. And so the fact that it's even getting noticed by a podcast like this, it's a very Jack Sparrow situation.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
Now, the full review that I'm going to be walking you through is about, I think, 95 minutes long or so, but I've trimmed it down to around 20 minutes or so of kind of the best clips or the things that I had the most to say about. So if you would like to watch that full clip, I will put a link to it in the description for this video. This should be a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy this. It's going to be not just responses to what they're saying, but also kind of some trivia and behind the scenes stuff about the Pilgrim's Progress film. So if you've seen that film and you enjoyed it, or if you've seen that film and you didn't enjoy it, this might still be fun and interesting to you. So without any further ado, let's start listening through this podcast.
God awful movies.
Welcome back to the Gamcast, where each week we lambaste another selection from that spreading infection we call Christian cinema, folks.
Okay, so this opens with the host, No Illusions. I assume that's a pun because it's an awfully convenient name for an atheist to have such an awful, bad, punny name. But we start off with them. They do a little rhyme because, of course, my Pilgrim's Progress film is all in rhyme. And some of the rhymes are pretty good, like you saw there. And other ones, not so much.
We watched The Pilgrim's Progress. This film was not a success.
Yeah, those weren't the finest rhymes.
This movie will open with the greatest anachronism we've had in any movie.
Pay attention to that
anything we've
anachronism,
ever watched. I paused the movie and rewatched it several times just for the first anachronism in the film.
There's more anachronisms than chronisms.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yes, exactly.
Than time.
Find a single
It's not like, oh, we
acronym.
left a Starbucks cup in the shot. It's not that. It's like it's in a Starbucks and they left an old cup in the Starbucks. Like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. They left a mug in the Starbucks.
Yeah, no, this is a period piece as brought to you by the aliens from Dark City. I have no fucking idea when anything is.
Okay, so, obviously, if you've seen the movie, a lot of that is true. We made this with no budget. We were basically framing the 21st century out of every shot. It would be, you're pointed at like the one old building we have, and if you tilted the camera a foot over, you'd see power pole or a car driving by in the background or whatever. There's times where in the backgrounds, if you look close, you can see power lines or you can see roads. I mean, there's obviously some severe budgetary limitations. But I want you to really notice what they said about the supposed greatest anachronism they've ever seen. And especially pay attention to the claim that they watched it multiple times, because as I will demonstrate later, I don't think that's true, and it will kind of start to get at the main problem that I see with this podcast.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for coming to the first ever rehearsal for Pilgrim's Progress. Just real quick, want to go over the costumes I'm seeing. Just be clear, we were going for medieval. So, yeah,
No, we
yes,
weren't.
question?
Yeah, what about a leather jacket and jeans with a ruff? Just a random ruff around my neck.
So I think it's funny they say it's supposed to be medieval, because I'm like, no, it really isn't. It's supposed to be, when you're watching the framing device parts with the narrator, it's pretty clearly like a Western, maybe mid to late 1800s kind of a time frame. And when you're watching the dream parts, the actual Pilgrim's Progress story parts, it was supposed to be more of this like intentionally anachronistic jumble of like 17th and 18th and 19th century stuff, sort of Wizard of Oz-ish, where it's period, but you're not really sure what it is, and there's sort of intentionally anachronistic elements, because we didn't have the money to do a real period piece. We decided to frame it more as like a Western because that's what we have access to here in Oregon. We have access to old buildings. We have access to things that would allow us to make a moderately convincing Western period piece. But I think this point really starts to get to one of the issues where I think this podcast could improve. And that is that when you watch, videos that are criticizing bad films from people like Red Letter Media or Say Goodnight Kevin, they're showing you clips of the film as it's going on. And I feel like that keeps them a little bit honest and accountable, because of course these people are going to make up fun little stories about like, oh, that actress is so bad, she must have slept with the director to get the role. And that kind of stuff is fun, but it's just sort of them speculating. With these people, some of the things they say, I feel like you can take way too seriously. I don't think they're like being malicious, but I do feel like the review is a little bit intellectually dishonest in that they kind of blow out of proportion a lot of things, which is fine when you have video there to keep you accountable, but because they don't, it like borders on them lying. And like I said, I don't think they're being malicious about it. I think it's all in good fun, but they get a little try hard sometimes. And so it becomes, oh, just bash the film, just say these things. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, that's just not accurate. And you'll see that a lot more as it goes on. So let's move on to this next clip here.
And we're back, and we're going to open up on everybody involved in this movie going, ooh, you guys got a Spinny logo. Man, I'll probably spend $1 or $2 on that Spinny logo.
Ooh, I told you that $5 was going to pay off.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know this is kind of one of those fun, harmless little backstory things they're making up. But come on, guys. I directed, shot, and edited a feature film for no money. Who do you think really made the logo?
And he walks up to a little like figurine and he's like, oh, dreamed of you. I was like, wait. Is this a guy, like a man you killed and you're taunting like, hey, remember when you died and I dreamed about you drowning? Isn't that a sinister, weird.
Remember when I trapped your soul in this carving of a banjo player? Yeah, exactly. What?
I just included that part because I think it's pretty funny.
Okay, so he's dressing up as a Union Army colonel, I do believe.
Yes! Okay, and jumping into his Victorian carriage thing?
Yeah, of which he's like an Uber carriage driver getting ready for a shift, I think. He's gonna.
Okay, but the best part is the carriage very clearly says, hop on, hop off carriage ride.
Yes, it does.
And it is my favorite anachronism we have ever encountered.
And we've read the Book of fucking Mormon.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a lot to unpack here. First of all, the fact that you talk about a Union Army colonel and a Victorian stagecoach kind of shows your guys' hand that you're being a little disingenuous when you say that this was, we're going for medieval. No, we weren't. A Union Army colonel would be from the 1860s, and a Victorian stagecoach, which I feel like you were trying to act like that's something so disparate from a Union Army colonel. That's like the same time period. That's like the late 1800s. So I don't really understand why that's supposed to be a criticism. A little try-hardy. The other part, the more important part, and this is why I said pay attention to this idea that they're going to see the greatest anachronism they've ever seen, one that's so bad they watch it multiple times. So they claim that the wagon says something like hop on, hop off carriage rides. It doesn't, just at all. In very big, very easy to read letters, which you should have noticed if you actually watched it multiple times, it says Grave Creek to jump off Joe Creek. That is just the line that the carriage would be on. It was the carriage that would have ran between Grave Creek, Oregon, and Jump Off Joe Creek, which is a real place. And actually, there's kind of an interesting story about how it got its name. I'll let Jefferson Public Radio tell you all about that.
Welcome to As It Was, Tales from the Mythical State of Jefferson. Jump Off Joe Creek, 11 miles north of Grants Pass, Oregon, refers to an accident involving 29-year-old Joseph McLaughlin. In 1839, young Joe McLaughlin joined a trapping expedition from the Willamette Valley to Mexican-controlled Northern California. Returning to camp one night, McLaughlin fell in the dark from a rocky bluff. He survived, but was seriously injured, with blood gushing from his mouth, and the expedition sent word to his father that his son had suffered a pulmonary attack. McLaughlin returned to Fort Vancouver, but never completely recovered from his injuries, dying in 1848 at age 38. For a while, the spot was known as the Jump Off Where Joe Fell, which was shortened eventually to Jump Off Joe Creek.
So yeah, I just don't really get how this is this great anachronism. It isn't. That's a real stagecoach from, I presume, the late 1800s. That is at the Applegate Valley, or Applegate Trail Interpretive Center in Sunny Valley, Oregon. And I think that's a pretty realistic thing that would be on the side of it. I would assume they've just repainted the actual stagecoach with, refreshed the paint with what it had already said. So this is where I feel like, in an effort to, make their audiences laugh and, look how inept this Christian film is, kind of being a little disingenuous, because that's not an anachronism. And this thing that you guys claimed you watched multiple times kind of clearly didn't.
And, from the movie's perspective, he gets in the carriage and then the carriage drives itself somewhere.
Yes. He's got a fully automatic Victorian.
He's got one of those Tesla carriages. They're so cool.
Exactly.
Come on. What's obviously really going on there is that he goes to the stagecoach. He gets on the stage and rides off on it with someone else driving it and horses pulling it. Now, of course, because we had no budget, we were just sort of trying to get a little bit of extra production value by using this stage, which happened to be right next to another location we were filming at. And so all the stagecoach moving really is he climbs in, and then it's a little giddy up whistle, which was me, just recording a sound in my office. And then the stage didn't actually move. It's kind of locked down there. So I was probably damaging this priceless piece of history, but it's me with the camera on the ground, ramming into it as hard as I could so that it kind of lurches forward 2 or 3 inches and gives the illusion of some motion, and then adds some horse sound effects. And then I just shot, I put the camera down nice and steady on the porch that's right next to this thing. And we just rocked the carriage back and forth. And then I went in and I made sure that our actor, Matt, who was playing the narrator, didn't cross in front of the camera, in front of the window, so it didn't make it hard for me. And with that nice square window, it was really easy to motion track all the edges, erase the window behind them, and just put a random shot of some trees that I shot out of the window of a car behind it. And it made a pretty realistic looking carriage moving scene. And I thought it gave us some good production value. Now, the original idea we had there would have given us a lot more production value. We were going to try to use a train, but we had a bit of a mishap.
Production value! Gary, you put film in the camera, right? I didn't put it in. What? Put it in, Joe! Get the mic ready. Go!
And then we cut to a bunch of people dressed entirely in burlap singing Jesus songs.
Okay, in this scene, the costumes range from Halloween pirate to wearing a vest.
They clearly rated a costume shop of not a good community theater, a really shitty low-budget community theater, and this is what they had.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty accurate assessment of our costumes. A lot of them, they weren't even from a community theater. They were from past church nativity productions and stuff, and then repurposed to be used in a Western. I think that Mara, our production designer who plays Pilgrim's wife, who roasts him later and is also married to the actor who plays Pilgrim/Christian in real life, I think she did a wonderful job with what she had. But I mean, most of it was quite literally garbage. She would go to this place. It's like for stuff that wasn't good enough to go to Goodwill, so they sell it by the pound. And she would just go through and find old nasty boots and pants, and it would be like, $1 a pound or whatever. Or maybe it was like $1 for 5 pounds. I don't know. It was very cheap though. And she would just get stuff and repurpose it. I mean, there's people that are wearing things like Christmas tree blankets around their necks. There's all sorts of stuff. And actually in that scene, we tried to make it look like the church had 20 or so people in it, like it was relatively full. We had probably a third as many extras as you see in that scene. And so what we had to do was just sort of stagger everybody just right so that we could move them around for each shot as we were getting coverage, change their costumes a little bit, and fill in gaps. So again, it's kind of one of those things where it's like a little bit of a backhanded insult. Like they're noticing these admittedly often very silly costumes, but they're not noticing the filmmaking trickery. And this is why, like I said at the beginning, I think this is fun, and I'm really not insulted by any of this, because there's a lot of things in this movie that the fact that they don't bring it up really is a compliment to me and to how I did the best that I could with what I had.
And this church, by the way, it's so pathetic it shouldn't even bother existing. It's like a clown car, but a church.
Uh-huh.
Like they show you the exterior, and it's like a 4-foot by 3-foot box, and then inside it's like this huge exterior shot.
Yeah, no, it's like a TARDIS kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This cracks me up because I feel like they're trying to make it sound to their listeners like, oh man, they used some lame little miniature, and then inside was obviously a different building. The thing is, the exterior and the interior of this are the same building. This is a little historical church. I think it's maintained as a state park in a town called Wolf Creek. It's about 5 miles east of I-5. It's called Golden, Oregon. There's a little town or a little ghost town kind of thing. It has this church, has a couple other buildings. And the interior that you see is the interior that is inside of that church. And there's even a shot of people coming out of the church, and you can see it's a normal sized building that's 20 feet wide. So I don't really get it. Like they're blowing it out of proportion and making it sound like what we did was so inept. But frankly, this is like the best location, or at least the best building location we have in the whole film. And just to give you some funny, rather morbid trivia about it, I discovered this location because a man and his son's teenage friend died in a plane crash. There was a news article while I was working on this film in the early stages of it about a plane that had gone missing on its way to the coast from Grants Pass. And I was like, oh man, that's sad. And as I was looking through the articles, I saw a picture of like the missing kid, and he was in front of this sweet old church. And I was like, oh man, that's a badass location. I'm going to use that. And I looked it up and found where it was. So RIP plane crash victims. I'll try to put your names up on screen because I don't remember it. But thank you for your sacrifice.
So everybody sings a Jesus song or whatever, and then the Union Army colonel gets up to give a sermon.
God.
And he's standing in front of this wall that manages to look unrealistic, right? Like they put a green screen in front of a wall and then green screened into a wall.
Yep.
I totally see what you mean. It really does look kind of fake. And I've had people be like, is that a green screen? It's totally not. It's the actual back wall of that church. I think that was a pickup scene that we picked up later at a totally different time, like at nighttime or something. And so the other scene was supposed to be day, and it's like brightly lit, and we were like hastily trying to make it kind of look like day. I had, 2 really crappy Harbor Freight lights that we just kind of clamped up and then turned on the lights. And so something about the lighting just wasn't very good, and it does make it look rather fake, but it's completely real. There's no green screen there. There's several times in this movie where they wrongly identify things as visual effects, which I just find rather weird. But at least they didn't call out some of the actual visual effects, which range from terrible to passable. So that's good.
Yeah, so he's going to tell us the story of this movie while he cleans up his church. And after he tells us this, the movie basically just does a mulligan and starts different. Like, you know what? Now that I think about it, The drowning thing was fucking stupid. Let's start again.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of movies, Christian movies especially, that are very, very terribly structured and follow no kind of structure whatsoever. I don't really think that's something we're guilty of here. This is a very typical cold opening structure, which is something I do a lot in my films. And honestly, the framing device stuff with the narrator is probably the most normally structured aspect of the entire film, since the rest of it are all these weird little vignettes. So I don't really understand this criticism. This is a weird nitpick.
In rhyme, he's telling us the story of a guy walking through the wilderness who then rests by a stream and dreams the story. So we're now, we're 4 levels into being told this story?
Again, they're just kind of blowing out of proportion how hard this is to understand. It's all spelled out quite obviously in the narration. The film is the narrator telling the story about a dream that he had as a young man. Listen for yourself.
As I walked through the wilderness of this world long ago, my legs grew quite weary, my pace grew quite slow. So I sat down to rest by a trickling stream, where my heavy eyes shut, and I there dreamed a dream.
I don't really see why that is so hard to understand.
But he was dreaming of a guy having a rough go of it, turning into Bible Man was the visual that we got. But this is Pilgrim. This is our main character. We're finally going to get 5 levels deep and meet the guy this movie is about.
I've never seen Bible Man. I went and watched the YouTube video of his little transformation at the beginning, and I don't really see it. The funny thing is we way more blatantly ripped off something, and that is the best scene of Darren Aronofsky's otherwise fairly terrible Noah movie.
But they ate from the forbidden fruit. Their innocence is extinguished. And so for the 10 generations since Adam, sin has walked within us. Brother against brother. Nation against nation. Man against creation. We murdered each other.
And in addition to the Pilgrim moment, I guess it's his wife, but are they married, or is this a roast comedy?
That's what it is. They just roast him in rhyme. Every member of the family steps forward. Yeah. And says how much they hate him.
One of those kids, by the way, they had never spoken. It was their first words, and it's a roast in rhyme of this pathetic husband. And they all agree. The one thing this entire family agrees on is this guy's a dumb piece of shit, and he should get the hell out of here.
Yeah, like I've mentioned a couple times now, that's Christian's, or Jeremy, the actor's actual real-life wife, Mara, also our production designer, as I mentioned. So maybe she was just venting. As for the kids, those were our pastor's kids, so they got the roles via nepotism. So, hey, don't blame me if their line readings weren't the best.
Yeah, so he runs away from his family, screams at the sky somewhere, and that's where he meets a guy named Evangelist. Now, if you're not familiar with Pilgrim's Progress, all the characters are named like that, right? Like there's a character named Mr. Turnback. He'll turn back.
Yeah, this is completely true. I actually really enjoy a lot of these guys' criticisms of Pilgrim's Progress, the source material. I've never actually read Pilgrim's Progress. Rousseau, my friend who wrote it, who's at the time was our church's youth minister, and who did honestly a pretty amazing job writing the script for someone who'd never written a script before and made up most of the rhymes himself. Was always trying to get me to read it, and I was like, nah, Rousseau, my job is to make this movie make sense. I got to make sure that your weird, bizarre musical script makes any sense at all if people haven't seen the movie, so I'm not going to read the book. Which is partially true, and also I just didn't really want to take the time to read it. Yeah, Pilgrim's Progress, it's not my kind of allegory. I kind of look at it, when it comes to allegory, there's sort of two ends of the allegory continuum. On one end, you have Pilgrim's Progress, where it's purely allegorical. No one is supposed to represent a real flesh and blood person. They're supposed to represent concepts and ideas. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have something like Narnia, where you could even argue that isn't technically allegory. It's more like alternate dimension where Jesus also exists. I definitely prefer the Narnian end of the allegorical continuum. And this would never been my first choice of source material to adapt. And you're right, a lot of it is fairly ham-fisted. At the same time, you gotta give Bunyan a little bit of credit. This has stood the test of time, and it was written a long time ago. So he didn't have nearly as many shoulders to stand on as authors do today. So I'll cut him a little bit of slack. I won't give him too hard of a time in heaven about the ham-fisted nature of this.
So I guess we only have access to this guy's notes. We don't actually have the original work in which he figured out the names of the characters. We just have the place where he's like, well, this guy will be a fucking evangelist, and then I'll come up with a good name later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I didn't actually get the real draft, I guess.
That's really funny. Also, is that tack thing supposed to be a reference to the cobbler and the thief? I think it was.
Liquid Death is only available in a handful of stores, so you have to order it online. You just go to liquiddeath.com/awful. They're offering listeners an exclusive deal to get $2 off every case. That's liquiddeath.com/awful. Or, better yet, you can click the option to literally sell your soul on their website in exchange for a free case. Yes, you can actually sign a real soul contract that is legally binding for eternity.
I'm really not sure that atheists hawking canned unholy water have too much room to criticize anything as cringy or ham-fisted, but maybe that's just me.
We meet evangelists, and here's my theory. They had like an Irish cousin visiting, or this guy was just good at an Irish accent, because I will not understand a single syllable that he says in the movie. Right? His first line I have down here as fly to Nurukite.
Yeah, Sean is not at all Irish. He's just, honestly, a pretty good actor. Does a good accent. I am a little disappointed that you guys didn't make fun of the part where he just blatantly slips from Irish into English accent, though.
Entertainment and amusement are abundantly there, but its greatest snare is the village fair. I warn you, my brothers, beware. Beware. The armor of God you both must wear.
And he tells him to look for the, as Noah mentioned, narrow gate, which will be the first of 845,000 MacGuffins that this movie introduced.
Also, it won't be narrow.
I'm not going to defend any of this. Like I said, Pilgrim's Progress is not, it's not exactly my style of allegory at the end of the day.
Life! Life! Eternal life!
They were not so sure of anything ever in the history of their lives than that this fat lady running joke was going to kill.
So this is funny. First of all, I will have you know that fat lady running joke absolutely does kill. It kills hard. It wasn't intentional. That was not in the script. That's actually Rousseau, the guy who plays Faithful and wrote the script. That's his mom, Tina, and she's hilarious and she's a good sport. And she came out and was doing that role. And I'm just kind of making it up as I go. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, this is really messing up my shot list, how slow she's going. Then I get into editing and there was no good way to cut away from it. And so all of a sudden I had the idea of, what if I just like cut out the music and, put birds tweeting and just lingered on it and made it like a joke. And I put it in there and I was like, this is pretty funny. I think it's funny. And when I showed it to everybody, especially some of the girls involved, were like, oh, that's so mean. And Rousseau assured us, my mom's not going to care. She's going to think this is really funny. So we left it in. And, oh man, kids like die laughing at that part. They think it's so funny. And so do adults. I mean, come on, it's pretty funny.
They definitely code him gay. They have him in like, well, at least, sorry, I should say, they have him in foppish like Victorian wear from the waist up and pajama pants.
Josh was not coded gay. He was actually going for Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday in Tombstone.
500 must be a peach of a hand. Oh, thank you, darling. Kate, you're not wearing a bustle. How dude.
And I did not get that at first, but once he told me, as a fan of Westerns, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I totally see it. What's really funny to me about this, though, is that you think that Mr. Turnback is the one who's coded gay. Because, guys, did you see the introduction of Faithful?
But the Lord sent his way a friend's helping hand. A man named Faithful from Pilgrim's hometown had just climbed the hill and was now climbing down.
Is that you, Pilgrim, my neighbor and friend? God has sent me indeed, and I fled from our town. For shortly after you yourself departed, my journey to the city of glory started.
Sorry, Rousseau.
They are trying so hard not to stand up and show you how shallow this water is in this scene.
Yep. Yeah, those 17-inch rainwater ponds will really, they'll get you. Brutal.
So what's funny about this, I mean, I know exactly why you think it looks so shallow. That water is actually not that shallow. It's probably 4.5 or 5 feet deep. It was like up to Jeremy's shoulders. It was actually deep enough that when we were filming and planning to film, I was director, cinematographer, editor, and I guess key grip and safety guy too, because as we were getting ready to film it, I kind of did a little safety brief with Jeremy. I was like, all right, Jeremy, here, this backpack, it was built on like an army rucksack, and I was trying to show him like, okay, now here's how you can get it off, because I was really worried that he was going to get in the water and that the burden was going to get soggy and like drown him. I mean, I had like a knife and I was ready to jump in there and haul him out and like cut it off of him if it was drowning him. Because the burden, it didn't weigh that much. I remember Jeremy and Rousseau at one point were convinced. They're like, oh man, this thing's so heavy, it must weigh 45 pounds. And I picked it up, and I'm a backpacker, so I was like, guys, this is like 20 pounds tops. And they were like, no, it's got to be 45. We went and weighed it, and it was 21 pounds. So I laughed at them for being a little bit weak and soft. And sorry, guys. And then, so it didn't weigh that much. It weighed like 20 pounds. But I was really worried. I was like, there's pillows, blankets in here. And so as I was preparing for the scene, I said, Rousseau, what is inside of the burden? I need to know, because I need to be able to kind of assess how much it's going to sink, and taking it apart, the check wasn't an option. He said, oh, it has a lot of foam inside of it. And I was like, what kind of foam? Like closed cell or open cell? That's kind of important right now. And he was like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. And I was like, oh, great. Jeremy's going to drown, or I'm going to have to save him. So he jumps in and immediately like floats up, and he's like, getting choked out with the burden floating up here, bent forward awkwardly, like he's on his knees. And I was like, wait, Rousseau, what the hell did you put in this thing? And he thought, and he's like, oh yeah, most of it's an exercise ball. And I was like, great, thanks for telling me now, after I worried about Jeremy drowning, and after we made this look so stupid. But yeah, so it's not actually that shallow. It's like 5 feet deep.
And then, bless their optimistic little hearts, they left space for a commercial, guys.
Oh,
I felt so sorry for them.
No, we didn't.
As I found this movie, by the way, this movie has a website. They were sure it was going to get distribution. And then finally, like, you look at their super nice, someone paid someone's cousin to make a website, and then it's just, here, it's on YouTube. You can watch it. Please, just
put somebody fucking watch
it.
Let's hope we get picked up 3 a.m. Lifetime channel. We could do it.
No, they couldn't.
Okay, so this is a pretty funny little story that these guys made up. But I am going to be a little bit of a poopy butthurt filmmaker and defend my honor here. So that is not at all a commercial break. So to give you a little background on how this film came about, this film was originally not supposed to be a film. It was supposed to be a play for our church's vacation Bible school program. And eventually it was getting kind of elaborate as it was being planned. And so they said, hey, David, would you be interested in shooting some video segments for it, for things like a swamp where, we can't really do that very convincingly on stage. So I said, sure. And after about a month and a half of planning that, one day they were like, so David, would you like to just make this an entire film start to finish? Thinking that I would say no. And I just won like $10,000 in a filmmaking competition, so I had a little bit of money that I could step aside from my normal freelancing work and stuff, and just focus on something where was going to not only not make money, but just burn through all my savings living while I make it. And so I said, sure. And so we decided to make it. So the way the film was originally structured, the Vacation Bible School program took place over 4 days, and they showed a segment of the film in the morning and a segment of the film at night, or not at night, in the end of the day or whatever. It was like 8 to 12 minute segments. And so where it fades to black there, that was just the end of a segment where it then faded to the narrator. And actually in that version of the movie, I'll try to throw a couple clips up on screen here. The narrator was doing completely different stuff. It was you think the stuff he's doing in this version is silly. He was doing some really silly stuff in that one. And it made the kids laugh, but it wasn't really conducive to it being a feature film. So once the film was done and we realized it was way more successful and better done and more watchable than it had any business being, we went back and spent a couple days filming new narrator interludes that flowed a little better and lended themselves better to a feature film than to a little episodic, mini-series kind of thing. And in doing so, I smoothed out a lot of transitions that were initially just like kind of fade to black and then fade back in, but there's still a few of them, and that's one. So no, that is not an overly optimistic commercial break. There's a very logical reason for that being there. And on top of that, we actually could have very easily had distribution for this film. So as the film was coming together, I started realizing, man, it's got a lot of problems, and it's not what I would have chosen as my first feature film, but this is way more watchable than I could have ever imagined. And I went and I did a lot of research, and I made a list of a dozen or so small Christian film distributors. And there was one in particular that really stuck out at me because the guy running it seemed really honest. I liked how upfront things were on their website. They'd put out some other films that I felt like weren't big at all, in the low six-figure range, but were reasonably well done. And I was like, these are the people I would be most interested in being distributed by. I just cold call shot him an email, and the guy got back to me pretty quick, and he loved the trailer that he'd seen of the movie. He loved the rough cut of the movie that he saw. And he was like, yeah, I would love to work with you guys on distributing this. The last time someone made a Pilgrim's Progress film, which had a bigger budget than ours, it was like 2008 that one had been made. And I would guess it had a budget in the low to mid six-figure range. He said that film had made 7 figures. It had profited 7 figures, been hugely successful. So he was very, very interested in distributing the film for us. And then I took it to a couple Christian film festivals, and I had 2 or 3 other distributors that were like, yeah, we would love to have this. Part of that is because some of these places do have very low bars, but I still wanted to go with the other guy because he just seemed super honest and cool. We had a few really good chats. I really liked him. What ultimately happened though was the church just kind of decided they weren't really comfortable taking this thing that we'd made for nothing as an outreach tool and profiting off of it. So they decided to release the film for free on YouTube. We did a premiere at our church, which our church didn't have a building. We met in a high school that we rented. Our congregation normally had maybe 230 to 250 people in it on a given Sunday, but we had like 800 plus people, and we packed out the auditorium for the premiere. It was a huge success, and we did like a Q&A and talked to them, and the church kind of shared, this is our vision for this. We want to put this out online for free so people can watch it. Eventually, we'd like to potentially make like some Vacation Bible School curriculum so other churches can use it. So again, yeah, it wasn't, we got nothing else to do with it. The website was the entire plan. It was made just to get the film out there. And honestly, it's in that regard, it's succeeded beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It will hit 600,000 views in the next week or so here. And for a narrative film of that length with no budget, I think that's pretty astounding. I'm fairly proud of that. But yeah, so, gotta defend my honor a little bit here. Gotta be a little bit of a poopy filmmaker, but I hope you guys understand.
And this is such a ridiculous fucking temptation as well, right? Because the way that the story goes, he comes across this guy and he's like, oh man, you don't need to follow this narrow path and be religious and everything. You can just follow this simple set of rules and everyone will get along fine. that's the bad guy in this
That is
story.
one of the temptations of the protagonist, which, by the way, they symbolize as a mountain. Because, being kind and generous and taking care of each other is impossible like climbing a mountain.
So something I should have mentioned at the beginning of this review is that I'm not going to spend very much time addressing, the theological misconceptions of atheists in this. I just don't really see that as a fruitful use of my time here. I don't think that it would really go anywhere, and it wouldn't be very much fun. We run into a bit of a 1 Corinthians 1:18 situation when we do that. The way of the cross is folly to them that are perishing. But I do want to address this one just because this is a big, important thing. So, Christian theology does not teach that there's no point in being good to each other. It merely teaches that being good to each other cannot save you, and also that no one is really good. Christians absolutely encourage being kind to each other and being nice and, upholding God's laws in that way, loving your neighbor as you love yourself, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. But that's never going to save you. A core tenet of Christian theology is this idea that we are all hopelessly dead in sin without Christ regenerating us. And so, this is just, it's not accurate, and it just seems a little too smarmy to do this. I personally, I have a bit of a heart for atheists. I'm a pretty skeptical guy. If you're watching this and thinking, oh, it's like a paranoid survivalist with a bunch of guns. I mean, I am a survivalist. I would love to survive the apocalypse, but I'm also like the least paranoid person you'll ever meet. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, hardly ever. Although Epstein probably didn't kill himself. I'm not actually like sitting here thinking the end of times is coming. I just enjoy guns. I enjoy shooting. I'm a skeptical guy. I like evidence, so I can appreciate atheists. And, I try not to straw man them and misrepresent them. I hate the God's Not Dead films for that exact reason. They just straw man atheists, and I think they do a grave disservice to people like me who would want to reach out to atheists in good faith. So I would just say that kind of misrepresenting Christian theology like this is a little disingenuous. It would be like trying to say, oh, well, all atheists are nihilists, which, I might argue that I think the logical conclusion of being an atheist would be to be a nihilist, but I don't actually think atheists are all nihilists. I know that many atheists are perfectly decent people who can be good friends, who can be, loving family members. I don't think that not believing in God makes you a comically wicked person. So in the future, God-awful movie guys, if you're listening to this, just try to do a little bit better at representing your ideological rivals.
Yeah, I that's what I was thinking too. I was like, wow, hiking to the top of Mount Shasta or wherever they filmed this, it doesn't seem easier than what Jeremiah was doing before. Like, it actually seems a lot harder.
Yeah, right. Yeah, seems like they're fucking up their own allegory, right?
I'm really glad that Thomas got it right and said, Mount Shasta. That's not Mount Shasta, it's Mount McLaughlin, but, he's in the ballpark. Mount Shasta's only 2 hours from Mount McLaughlin or something. So, I just wanted to give you guys kudos on that one, getting it right that we are in the Pacific Northwest. Because as we'll find out soon, not everyone on the God Awful Movies team is quite as astute a student of geography.
And they're trying to climb up like obsidian stones the whole time. Was this fucking Mordor? Where Gollum jumps on him like
switchbacks, man. Use some switchbacks. It's a longer route, but it'll be a lot easier on you.
Like, I don't believe the close-up shots are the same as the faraway shots.
No.
Skeptical. I don't think it's an entire mountain made of obsidian pebbles.
Yeah,
I don't think that's actually Mount Fuji.
Yeah. They bought the stock footage of Fuji and then they filmed the movie at the old quarry, so it kind of doesn't match up.
Okay, so I was pretty kind to you guys on the last point there. I complimented you a little bit. And I will give Noah some kudos for suggesting they use switchbacks. But I'm going to bust the rest of y'all's balls a little bit about having never actually been above a tree line, because while that scene, you are correct, was filmed at an old quarry, it was filmed at a place called Elk Creek Dam, which is a giant abandoned dam project that I've used in many films. It has been a dystopian prison camp in some of my films. It has doubled as North Korea in a little comedy sketch that I made, and I like it a lot. But I will have you know that I specifically used it that day because it actually does look pretty convincingly like the side of a mountain when you get above the tree line. You know, I filmed this on a nice blue sky day so that I could blue screen out the sky and make it look all stormy. And that was probably the main reason for doing it there. But it was definitely a nice bonus that it looks like scree. So scree are small little loose rocks that you will see on the sides of mountains when you get above a tree line. It makes it very hard to walk through. I'll just show you some pictures of it to show you that this actually is a pretty realistic depiction of the high side of a mountain.
Christians have so thoroughly internalized the being a good person isn't the point and doesn't matter message that they don't even know it's fucked up anymore.
Yeah, again, like I said, this just is not an accurate representation of what most like Orthodox, theologically conservative Christians believe. So, yeah, just, give us a little more credit, guys.
And the best part is, this is someone's front gate in Bayonne, New Jersey, wherever they filmed this fucking movie. So we can't slam into it too hard. So he's got to do like like chasing a toddler. Yeah, here I come, running into the gate.
Okay, Eli, I'm going to give you a little geography lesson. Bayonne, New Jersey is a suburb of New York City. I have no idea why you would think anything in this movie looks like a suburb of New York City. We are in Oregon. I'll talk about that later. Everyone else seemed to get that it was the Pacific Northwest, so I'm not sure why you thought we were in the urban center of Bayonne, New Jersey. But you are right. That gate was a little bit of a joke. I forget who suggested it first, but that's the gate to the Brett Garden in Jacksonville, a pompous little old folk town around here. So as we were filming it, if you turned the camera like any direction, I mean, just a couple degrees, you'd see the 21st century. You'd see that it doesn't look period at all. And we actually almost broke it from him running into it because it was not a very sturdy gate. But we couldn't do that. We didn't want to break it and get it on video. So you're right. It was a little bit wimpy.
I wanted him to bust into it.
Oh, but no, he knocks and a guy comes through and says, "Oh yeah, no, this is the narrow gate. It's not symbolic of anything really. You just means that you're going further down this path. Your princess is in another castle."
Yes!
Is what I'm trying to tell you.
Your princess is in another castle. And again, up until this point, the entire movie has been about how his sins will fall away through this gate. And the guy's like, "Yeah, you made it to the gate."
One of the big problems with Pilgrim's Progress and with adapting it, especially adapting it for children. So my understanding is that in the book, the gate, passing through the narrow gate represents salvation. It represents getting saved, because when you go through there, it's narrow because there's only one way to get saved, one way to heaven, and that is by grace through faith in the atoning death of Jesus Christ. So that's what it's supposed to represent, and the burden doesn't fall off his back there, because while he is saved from his sins, he still feels the burden of them until he gets to the cross, and then he feels the burden of the sin lifted, and he finally realizes, like, oh yes, I am forgiven. It's sort of like when he goes through the gate, God has forgiven him, but he doesn't fully understand that he's been forgiven until he gets to the cross. It's kind of weird. It's pretty confusing. And I'm not a big fan of the way that Bunyan has to take like every minute little thing that could ever possibly happen in a Christian's life and make some metaphor out of it. It might work okay in book form and for, a fairly serious Christian to understand that. But we were dealing with like kindergarten through fourth graders. So we simplified things. And in our version, for all intents and purposes, he gets saved at the cross, which does introduce some pretty big problems here because it's like, well, wait, what happens at the gate? I don't know. It's a kid's movie.
Listener, come on this little metaphor journey with me. Imagine you put Noah in 700 years at gunpoint and made him participate in this movie. That will be Interpreter's performance throughout this film. Hi, how's it coming? Welcome to my house. I'll teach you many things. Come inside.
No, I had it down in my notes as this guy's delivering his lines like he's not allowed to pee until he finishes them.
Oh, man. This is probably my single least favorite scene in the movie to watch. There are so many problems with the interpreter scene. Up until now, there's been a couple of decent sequences, a couple of rough sequences. I think from here on out, the movie picks up and gets a little bit better. But man, whenever I'm watching this with the crowd, I'm really embarrassed in this scene. Some of the problems with the scene, I think the biggest problem with it comes down to it's a huge, very talkative scene. And remember, this was initially supposed to be a play. And so to play the interpreter, who has a lot of dialogue, Mara, who was mostly in charge of our casting, and also Jeremy, they suggested Larry, a man from our church. He's an elder at our church, wonderful, very godly man. And they suggested him because he has like half the Bible memorized or something, like just a shockingly good memory. And just because you can memorize things, it doesn't necessarily mean you can deliver lines. And God bless Larry. I thank him so much for being in it. He gave it his all, and he was a great sport, putting up with people a third his age all day. But it's rough. The next problem that happened was, for most of the film, I was working the camera and like holding a boom mic under my armpit, trying to dangle it over people, kind of listening to it as much as I can. And that day we got some really bad interference somehow. I don't know if it was a bad cable or what happened, but somehow like 2/3 of the dialogue was ruined by this like little whine that would kind of come in and out sometimes. And then compounding that, and because we were kind of able to save Jeremy's dialogue, but making it even worse then was the fact that Larry, his voice was just kind of too soft and wheezy for it to pick up on camera very well. So it was so quiet. By the time we'd equalized it and brought his lines up to match Jeremy's somewhat, it sounded atrocious. So then Jeremy had to like ADR everything. And Jeremy is a recording artist, and he knows what he's doing, and he can he can hit timing and stuff, and he can watch video, and he's young, and so he has the patience to make sure that all of his lines are pretty well synced. And God bless Larry. We didn't want to put him through the hassle of making sure that every line was synced, so he did his best. But there's a couple lines, especially at the end of the scene, where they're just horribly out of sync. I'm like mortified every time we watch it with a group of people. I'm surprised how few people notice, because I mean it's like cartoon caricature of a 70s dubbed kung fu movie bad. It's bad.
Have you understood all these things, my friend?
Yes. And I'll think of them often till my journey comes to an end.
You know, I did some other things to try to make this scene more interesting, because the first couple times we watched it, we were like, this is awful. Is there a way we can just cut this out of the movie? And Rousseau would say, no, you can't do it. This is so important. The interpreter represents the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, oh, it's so embarrassing. So I went through and I did a pretty intensive color grading pass to make it look a little darker, a little bluer, a little more atmospheric. And that seemed to do some stuff. The biggest thing I think that added something to that scene that was interesting was the nightmare sequence. There was all this imagery I would have loved to have in there, like apocalyptic type stuff that we just didn't have. We obviously couldn't do. So I went through and I found some stock footage of like explosions and eyeballs, and I constructed a bunch of stuff to go in there and make at least the nightmare sequence a little bit more horrifying. So that made it a little bit more interesting. But for the most part, this is my least favorite sequence in the entire film. God bless you, Larry, if you're listening to this, brother. I'm so thankful that you did it. But it was a rough scene, and I'm sure you had a rough time filming it.
He's doing more and more insane chores every time we reach him.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, next time we see him, he will be picking his lawn by hand.
You will.
This is a classic example of exaggerating things to a degree that feels disingenuous, which I get. I mean, it's fun, but when there's no video there, it just feels disingenuous because by picking his lawn by hand, what you mean is he's weeding. I mean, maybe you guys never worked with your hands in your life. I don't know. But it's a pretty normal thing to do, weeding a yard. He's picking weeds out of a gravesite. I think most of the chores he does are fairly normal. I mean, it's a little goofy with him talking to the camera as if it's a person, but come on. This is you guys are blowing this out of proportion.
All right, so back in the story, we go to the musty, dusty room, which is both musty and dusty.
Look, in this movie's defense, this is much better as a written metaphor than it is when you watch a 14-year-old girl pour water on a bunch of stuff and then see the floor covered in gross shit and mud, and she pretends to be cleaning it, right? She's like, there you go, all better. Not spreading it around and now wet, if that's what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend the metaphor here. It's not the best one. I don't know if John Bunyan had ever actually mopped before. I just think it's funny that you called Heather a 14-year-old girl because she's like 25 and has 2 kids. This scene's actually so much like cheesier than this makes it sound, if I'm being honest. The way that we did it was there were 2 rooms in our church building, which I mentioned earlier. We don't have a church building. That's true. We don't have like a sanctuary meeting, but we do have like an office building that's near the school. So that's why I said that. But there were 2 identical rooms right next to each other, and they were going to be turned into like a recording studio for Jeremy with like a pass-through wall and like a window to see people working in the other room. It's a really cool setup now that it's done. So they were remodeling them, and so one room they were tearing out all the drywall and stuff, and it was like half done or a quarter done or something. And a guy who actually acted in the film, Mitch Glockling, who we will talk a lot more about Mitch later. He's one of the most fun parts of this video. He was tearing it out, and he'd like stop to go to lunch or something. He's like, oh yeah, it's going to take me a while. And I was like, oh, Mitch, you're just milking this job. So I went up there and ripped it all out. So there was just a bunch of crap on the ground. Insulation, drywall, very, very anachronistic stuff that's not dust at all. And so then we just had him pour water on it and sweep it and then film the other scenes in the other room where it's magically clean. Because, yeah, the metaphor doesn't really make that much sense. So we just kind of made it more of like a supernatural thing, really obvious for kids because just dust was never going to play very well on camera.
Nice close-up on the plastic part of his glasses that didn't exist until the 1900s.
This actually really cracks me up because you guys missed a huge opportunity for a joke here. It's not just the plastic part. Larry's hearing aids are like blatantly visible here. I'm surprised I've never heard anyone say anything about it.
And that's when he meets the best character in the show.
Oh, yeah.
1600s me, Tom Coughlin with a gig at a burlesque show.
That's really good.
Atheist.
That is absolutely it.
Oh, man. You guys, I'm so glad you like Atheist. I actually had to fight Rousseau a little bit to change some aspects of the Atheist dialogue because it was a little cringy at first. Sorry, Rousseau. No offense. Like there were some lines there where he talks about, back when I went to school, originally it said, for example, I think it said like back when I was in public school, kind of bashing on public school, which don't get me wrong. I am an anarcho-capitalist libertarian who doesn't believe that public schools should exist. But we were making this film to show to vacation Bible school kids at a public school building we were going to be using, mostly public school kids. I was like, guys, let's not make these kids feel all crappy and like make fun of them for going to public school. And let's just not be so cringy. There were some other like really, really cliche atheist things in there. Like it talked about evolution and it was like, I don't think it really has anything to do with this. So I toned a lot of that back a lot and tried to make him a more realistic atheist. So thank you for enjoying the Atheist character.
This guy's name is Atheist. He's an atheist. kind of like, he didn't really have a choice in the matter. It would have been really confusing if he'd grown up to be Christian.
Okay, so I know this part of the movie hasn't happened yet, but I do want to point out that one of the very next scenes canonically establishes that in this universe, people's names can change because Pilgrim goes from Pilgrim to Christian when he gets saved.
But you have to admit, I mean, he nailed Atheists, right? Like, admit it. This is us. Like,
Is
us.
I mean, he's got us.
If we're at Bill, first of all, like, he laughs at this guy for like 5 minutes when he realizes that he's praying in the middle of the road to see which way to go. And I'm like, all right, so far, this is a fair portrayal.
Major points for honesty, guys.
I have a theory that Atheist was supposed to sing his lines because the backup music comes in during his lines. It's like, bum, 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 bum. And this guy was just like, I'm God, blah, blah, blah. This
was another scene that, kind of like the interpreter scene, was pretty rough. And I was like, oh man, we have like two wordy old guy scenes right next to each other. Mike had a little bit easier time with his lines and with being audible than Larry did. But, it was still just a guy from our church who hadn't acted. I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but every single person in this is either someone from our church or the friend of someone from our church. This is completely volunteers. I'm sure you can guess that. But just remember, these aren't, like, except for kind of me, no one working on this film is any kind of professional in any sense of the term. But yeah, so there's another scene where it was like, when it's edited together, you're just like, oh man, this is a snooze. Can we cut this? And then Jeremy rather brilliantly came up with the idea of adding a sort of like rap-esque backing to it. And he didn't go so far as like auto-tune him and make it sound like he's really rapping. But I think it made the scene a lot more watchable. It kind of added this fun rap battle element to their little debate. And it made it make more sense because, oh man, if you think it's pathetic now, you should have seen it before.
There's also in here, I think maybe right before this, we get another quick peek at the narrator who's changing the oil on his lectern.
Okay, that's a quality joke. I think that's hilarious, especially when you see the imagery. This is the kind of jokes I think that need to be done more often on this show. These jokes that really work with the visual instead of like, haha, look at this anachronism. But the anachronism is like so exaggerated, it's almost a lie.
And also, I'm pretty sure he's wearing a woman's blouse. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he will wear a variety of blouses, men's, women's. At one point, he just gives up and starts wearing athletic shorts. His costumes change wildly from scene to scene.
So, okay, he wears the same costume the entire thing. I mean, we didn't even have an alternate version of it. He wore the same exact costume. There is, if you pay attention, some degradation of it. It gets ripped a little bit more. It gets dirtier. Sometimes that can change from scene to scene because obviously not everything was shot chronologically. But he's wearing the same costume. So, I mean, again, God awful movies, guys, if you're listening, come on. This is a little disingenuous.
Here's a plastic sword that we picked up. We got it in November because they put all that shit on sale in November.
Not a plastic sword. It's very obviously a metal sword from the video. And honestly, like, probably one of the better props in the whole movie. I'd say the only, probably the best prop in the movie is the burden. I think the burden looks really good. The burden's well designed. It looks good. Rousseau did a great job with it.
All right, but he gets to the top of a mountain.
Oh, God.
And then he comes across the movie's only African American.
I was going to say, he comes across the supervillain who is a black person. It's just a single normal black person. Just completely just a black guy. That's all it is.
Well, they've put him in like lizard makeup or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, but like you clearly used the black guy, man. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, this is hands down my single favorite criticism that these guys make in this whole podcast. And the reason being, Apollyon is not played by a black guy. Apollyon is played by Mitch Glockling, who is a very, very pasty white ginger guy. I'm not even making this up. After we shot that scene, he told me that he got sunburnt through the spandex that he was wearing. That's how white he is. So the fact that they think he is black is hysterical. And then the fact that they think it's the only black person in the movie cracks me up too. At the beginning, there's a churchgoer her name in real life is Patty, who pops up for a second, and she's black. Now, to be fair with her, I could see her just being a little bit of a little more racially ambiguous. But later on, there's a much more prominent character who plays one of the angels at the end, played by a guy named Roman, and he's pretty obviously a black guy. Like, I don't know how you miss that. This joke, to me, I think it's both the funniest to me because they got it the most wrong, but it's also like the best example of just being way too try-hard. It's like you just wanted to, here's this little conservative church. I bet they did something awkward and racist. So they were looking so hard. They made up this whole giant conspiracy theory. And guys, let me tell you what, they're going to hammer this thing home. There's going to be 3 or 4 more clips throughout this where they keep going back to, the one black guy. But it's just not true. So, I'm showing you some pictures of Mitch, so you know what he looks like. He's a very pasty white guy. Mitch pops up multiple times in the film, actually. He also plays the Giant of Despair because he's one of the better actors we had and definitely has the right, body type and facial expressions and acting abilities to play the Giant. And he also plays one of the boxers in the Vanity Fair scene. So, yeah, I don't know how you confused this pasty white ginger, which oddly enough, I just realized that ginger is an anagram of something much worse, and I'm finding myself very thankful that I'm not dyslexic right now. But he's not black, and maybe it says more about you than it does about me that you assumed he was. Just saying.
I was just picturing what it must have been like when they announced the casting for this, right? They're all sitting around just to see white faces. He's sitting up towards the front, and they're like, and finally, for Apollyon, the evil beast, we were thinking, Dave, you could do it.
And everyone's just already looking at him.
Already.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Y'all gonna make me play the bird line, aren't you? I'll be your fucking bird line. I hate you guys.
So
oh man, this is too much. Like, this is way too much effort and commitment to this joke that you could have realized was wrong by looking at the credits, and you really had no reason to think he was black. I cannot for the life of me figure out why they thought he was black. Was it because they thought, he has a broad nose? But that's clearly a makeup nose, so I don't know. Was it the voice?
Tell me, where do you come from, and where is your destination?
But I mean, the voice is pretty obviously computer altered, so I can't really think of any reason for it. But it makes it even funnier that they're also assuming the evil guy is black, and now they're making they're kind of affecting a faux black voice. So I don't know, guys. This is not a good look.
I would watch this guy block this fucking spear over and over again on repeat for the rest of my life. And secondly, he does, right? Like, there's no fucking question that this is the background on every computer he's ever owned is him blocking this fucking spear with his shield.
He blocks the spear with his shield, and then the spear explodes?
After Effects explodes behind him.
Yes.
Which means, and I will pay any amount of money for this footage. If you're listening, makers of this movie, please, any amount of money. There is cut footage somewhere of this guy getting beamed in the fucking chest by this spear and then crying and yelling about how he wasn't ready. And I need that footage. It needs to be my screensaver.
Oh man, I wish that footage existed because I would love any amount of money right now. But it doesn't. He never got hit. He just did a few less than athletic deflections, perhaps. So here, I'll show you those clips while I'm talking. As you can see, none of them ever hit him. What I can show you of someone on this movie goofing is this clip of Rousseau not listening to me when I very specifically told him to roll the burden so that it would hit the bush. So look where my camera's pointed, so just roll it so it's kind of maybe going towards those bushes. That'll hopefully stop it too.
Uh-huh. I don't think it'll go.
All right, and action.
Oh crap.
Oh my god.
Keep it going.
Holy crap! Oh no! You missed that push. He had to walk like 300 yards down that hill and come back up with it. It was pretty funny. So not quite getting hit in the face with a spear, but it was one of the funniest behind-the-scenes bloopers from this movie. One other thing I want to say about this scene is that is not an After Effects explosion. If you hadn't noticed from this movie, I suck at digital effects. I don't do digital effects. I'm pretty bad at them. I can do a halfway decent sky replacement and some really basic masking, and that's about it. I don't even have After Effects. What I do have, though, are guns and a little bit of pyrotechnic know-how. So that is a real fireball. What we did was we shot Jeremy deflecting the spear, and once I got a good take, I, without moving the camera, went to where the spear had landed, and I built a fire. And in that fire, I stuck a can of spray paint. And then I shot that can of spray paint with this rifle right here. My insanely accurate, highly customized Ruger 1022. When you shoot a canister like that in a fire, it makes a rather impressive, like 15-foot fireball. And you can actually see, if you look here, the can flying across the screen. That is the spray paint can, which I ended up leaving in the final movie when I combined the two cuts, or the two shots, because I thought it was some kind of cool debris. So there you go. That was a real explosion. How dare you call it After Effects? How dare you?
And I love, too, because they cut back to the fucking narrator who's like, and they had a great fight scene that we would love to show you if we could pull off that kind of thing, but I think we both know we can't, so...
Oh, come on. You guys can't make fun of me for that. That was a funny line. That was quality, self-aware, self-deprecating humor. You can't be too hard on me for that one. You know that was funny.
Apollyon is about to stab him with his spear, but wouldn't you know it, Jesus literally gives him Jedi powers.
Yeah, he does the exact lightsaber call from Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
It's so funny. I literally just watched Empire Strikes Back. I was getting my wife to watch it for the first time like a week ago. Yeah, I mean, that's the exact lightsaber grab from the Wampa scene.
And we're back for more of this shit. When we last left our hero, he had murdered the only person of color in this film thus far.
Still with the weird black guy jokes.
So we meet Faithful, whose hairdo can only be described as asshead.
Oh man, I bet this No Illusions guy is like a really handsome, dapper guy with a sweet haircut if he's going to be making fun of these fictional haircuts intended to make children laugh. I wonder what he looks like. Oh.
Luckily, though, for Pilgrim, he's brought along magic leaves so that they don't have to keep doing scars. Their makeup guy said, look, one time I'm doing scars, guys.
This wasn't even makeup. I think the real story is actually way sadder. So that was like a rock hitting Jeremy in the shin from when I was throwing boulders down the mountain at him a little bit earlier. One of them hit him, put a big scratch on him. And his wife was supposed to come out and do some actual halfway decent looking makeup for an injury that would be healed. And then we were just going to cut it. And then I was like, no, we kind of need this here to have him healing and have the narrator stuff. Otherwise, it's just going to be he's laying down, then he gets back up and there's nothing. So we just used this very pathetic cut that was on one of his legs. And then I shot the reverse shot from the other direction on his other leg and mirrored it in post to look healed. It's pretty stupid. But, I don't know, it works.
We also get an incredibly long shot of Pilgrim gulping down healing water and Old Faithful looking rightfully horrified at the extreme close-up of his drinking wet lips.
Oh, dude, this scene, I'm going to let you know right now, this scene kills it with kids. They laugh so hard at it. It's another one of those scenes, kind of like the fat lady running in the beginning, that was just kind of an accident of editing. As I'm in editing and I'm cutting this together and he was just supposed to take a drink, I don't have any takes that cut together well without using this really weird, awkward thing. I think I might have even like used a shot of Rousseau doing a look that I'd reversed to make it all fit, because I ended up just constructing this scene of him taking this awkwardly long drink and Rousseau being kind of horrified and doing the goofy look that makes kids laugh. And it works. Kids laugh really hard. When I first showed that cut to like Rousseau and Jeremy, they were like, this is dumb. Why is this in here? Like, no one will get it. And I was like, I think kids will think it's funny. They didn't believe me. And I was right, I guess, because I'm the big dad.
So he drinks all the water out of his glass bottle that clearly has a twist cap. We don't see the twist cap, but it's it's there.
I really don't know why they do this kind of thing. Like, that's just, no, there's no twist on cap. There's no threads. You can fairly clearly see when he's drinking out of it that it's just a little lip on the top of it, not threads. And Rousseau pulls a cork out of it that fits it perfectly and looks like it goes with it. So I don't know if this is some weird hippie kombucha bottle or something that Jeremy brought. I don't know where it came from, but it's not a twist on cap. It's a glass bottle with a cork. And that's really obvious, so I don't know why they say otherwise.
Are they by Lake Tahoe or something? I really want to know where they filmed this. I know that, so I've done some amount of research. The guy's from Oregon, the guy who wrote it all.
Yeah, I was going to say Pacific Northwest, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's quite lovely.
I was just like, I wanted to go to take a hike with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's about the only truly nice thing you guys say in this whole review. So thank you. Yes, it is the Pacific Northwest. I shot the film entirely in Jackson, Josephine, and Klamath counties, which are all in Southern Oregon. They all border California, so we're way down here. One thing that I was really adamant about when we were making this film, I told everybody, I was like, look, we have no money. What little money we do have, we should put towards burning up in gas money to go to cool locations. Because if we're going to make a feature-length fantasy film with no budget, we should at least take advantage of the fact that Oregon kind of looks like a fantasy world. And I think we succeeded. We got a lot of really pretty stuff in here. We get tons of compliments about how pretty the scenery is, and I'm really happy about that. This particular scene where Rousseau's very modern boxers are hanging out of his pants, this is the Rogue River Gorge. It is right by Union Creek, Oregon, which is close to Klamath Falls. Sorry, not Klamath Falls, which is close to Crater Lake, which is a national park, which also is featured in the film. So, yeah, thank you. I think it's a very beautiful location.
They're heavy on jugglers, this Temptation Society, whatever they are. This Vanity Fair is what it's called. And they've also got a fight going with a juggler in it. like an MMA fight, but like the ref is a juggler, or there's just a juggler way too close to, and because of course this is just, very lascivious behavior. There's a guy carrying a little basket that says bets.
You guys spend a lot of time making fun of how tame Vanity Fair is. I find rather offensive because personally I think that Mandingo fighting is a horrible practice.
So then they're like, oh, the giant's going to come take him to the castle. But then we cut back to the narrator because they can't afford to do a giant.
Right.
The narrator at this point is washing his hands in a tiny bucket.
Yep.
You're wondering how bad the pantomime has got.
Clearly washing his hands after just having taken a giant shit.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we couldn't do a very good giant. I don't really understand why the narrator washing his hands in the bucket is supposedly so weird, though. The last time we saw the narrator, he was weeding his yard, or should I say picking the yard with his hands. He was weeding a graveyard outside the church, so if you're working in the dirt like that, you're going to get dirty hands. He's been doing manual labor stuff around the church all day, washing windows, picking stuff up, and then weeding. And now he's washing his hands, which, as you'll see later, he's kind of getting ready for the end of the day. That seems like a pretty logical progression. I don't really think rinsing off your hands in a bucket is weird. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand this. It's like a criticism. It's a stretch.
All right, so they get taken off by the giant. Not the giant, by the way, who won't be shown next to any sized thing, you know?
No, of course. But will be wearing very clearly marked Nike shorts throughout his performance.
That he will.
No, he's not. He's not wearing Nike shorts. I don't know where they're getting that. I've gone through this, and there's like one or two scenes, like we're talking one or two blurry frames, where you can maybe see like a little white thing on his hip, which I think is part of his shirt or a string or something, because he's not wearing Nike shorts. He's not even wearing gym shorts. He's wearing these, I don't know, kind of weird baggy short pants things, but they're not at all Nike shorts. So I don't know where you're getting that, let alone getting the idea that they're clearly marked as Nike shorts.
And they were so proud of he pokes them with a regular size spoon, and then we see the actors reacting to a large spoon.
Yeah, clearly it's like a fucking metal rake. Like that's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
for the fork.
Not a rake.
The director might as well have walked out on screen and been like, get it? Giant. Because he's a giant.
Yeah, so we actually were kind of proud of that. It worked out really well. Jeremy, who plays Christian, his grandma or something, for some reason, had two different sizes of virtually identical carved salad utensils. One that was like a foot long and one that was like 2 feet long. It was like a double scale. And we kind of established the giant on a double the size of a human scale. So roughly he's like 12 feet tall or something. So what we did with that scene to make the giant big or look big, because I thought about trying to do a shot of where you're looking past them sitting there and you see the giant. But when I started looking logistics of it, it was never going to look very good with my skills. And it was going to be tough to do, so I just didn't. What we did instead was we did the salad spoon thing, which it's not a metal rake. They're actually very, very similar props. They're a pretty good match for each other. But the main thing we did was we built two different sets of prison bars. One of them is built with 1-inch PVC pipe, 4 inches on center, and that's the one that you can see when you're looking at the giant, because that one looks very small compared to him. And the other one, since we were working off the idea that the giant is double the size of Christian and Faithful, the other set of bars was made with 2-inch PVC pipe, 8 inches on center, so it doubled the scale. And I mean, it's obviously very lo-fi, but I think it worked okay. I'm a little disappointed you guys didn't mention the best of the giant effects, which was when we took one of the kids from the beginning, one of our Pastor Kenner's kids, and stuffed them in a bag and carried them on the giant's back to make it look like, there were two grown men in the backpack. I think that was a pretty good effect. So we do kind of show the giant next to something sized, but for the most part, you're right. We couldn't do a very good giant.
And then we cut to the narrator, by the way, right after that. And he is 100% going to fuck his wife while he finishes telling the story.
Yes!
Like, absolutely.
He's like changing into his fuck clothes. Checking himself out sidelong in a mirror. Yeah.
So this part really confused me. When I heard it, I had no idea what they were talking about. I was like, what? Did the narrator accidentally do something that looks weird and sexual? Did he make a weird face? I had to kind of go through and see what that next part of the thing the narrator does was. And when I saw it, I was so confused. I was, what's going on here? All the narrator's doing here, as you can see, is lighting some candles, which I kind of see the joke they're going for, like, oh, he's lighting candles, like that's a romantic thing to do. But not mentioning the candles really ruins the joke. You know what this nitpick really reminds me of? Is it reminds me of this time, like a year or two ago, where Neil deGrasse Tyson was just being so pedantic and obnoxious. He was talking about the movie Chappaquiddick, which is about Ted Kennedy accidentally drowning that girl in the Chappaquiddick River. And this is what he wrote on Twitter. Chappaquiddick occurred just 2 days before the first lunar landing, so you'd think the film producers would get the moon right for July 18th, 1969. Kennedy sees it full, but the actual phase was a 4-day-old waxing crescent that set long before the midnight tragedy. I'm just saying. So So Neil deGrasse Tyson writes this like most pedantic tweet of all time, thinking he's being very clever and very smart. But in doing so, he outs himself as someone who just doesn't understand the basic visual language of film. The moon in Chappaquiddick was there to establish why there's a bunch of light outside. Half the movie takes place at night, so they needed to establish a good reason for there being a blue, relatively bright light lighting up the entire night. Now, of course, it doesn't even really look that much like moonlight, but you got to throw a full moon up there to justify it. That is a classic filmmaking trick. And I feel like that same kind of thing happened here. In their try-hardy efforts to make a edgy, crass joke about the narrator, they just completely missed, like, guys, this is just the establishing shot of him lighting candles so that you understand why for this scene and the subsequent scene, which are clearly taking place at night, you understand why you can see anything in this church. And of course, the lighting inside the church doesn't really look very much like candlelight at all, but it's kind of the magic of movies. It's the way that visual languages work. If you can throw in something like that to establish something, to establish a rule, to establish why there's light, you can stretch the truth a little bit.
And just then, a couple of the angels show up and say, well, you've made it to the end of the path. Now get in the river and drown yourself to death. We're the good guys.
Yeah, this was just an elaborate jigsaw type torture process, and now they die.
This is pretty funny. I mean, it completely ignores the fact that it's an allegory and not, a literal thing that's happening, but it's still pretty funny.
And somehow we get a quick shot of that before he drowned himself in this place that was, 5,000 miles away from where he started. He leaves his Bible for his wife right next to her. Wait, did I?
Well, he asks the angel to drop it off. Apparently the angels have a stamps.com kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I missed that. Sorry.
Thank you, Noah, for clearing that up. You're absolutely right. Man, you guys don't always pay the best attention to these movies, do you?
Which means that we then get a montage of his family drowning themselves, including the children. It's literally, honey, I drowned the kids.
Yes, Jesus Christ. My notes here are just like, oh my God, this is fucking Jonestown. What is this is dark.
Hey, like I said, I never thought my first feature film would be a family-friendly musical, so I got to bring a little bit of my dark action filmmaker edge to it. But yeah, I mean, again, I think this is really funny because we've always made fun of, we're like, dude, it's so funny that the end is like infanticide. It's just killing all their kids. I mean, it makes sense in the context of, oh, this is an allegory. None of these are real people. These are all concepts. These are representing a Christian's walk. This isn't necessarily them literally dying so much as it is a representation of a Christian reaching the end of his journey faithfully. But yeah, it's pretty funny. And the really funny thing is that we did it too because we wanted to give the film a happy ending. There's a whole other sequel to Pilgrim's Progress called Christiana, I think. I think that's the name of Christian's wife in this movie. And it's about her and the children going on a journey. And we obviously have no desire to make another movie like this. So we decided to incorporate a little bit of that into the ending just so the kids that are watching this aren't like, wait, so their dad just abandoned them and now they have no dad? Because then you start getting into that kind of horror. And it was easier just to have kind of the happy ending where they all go to heaven and they're reunited as a family and all is well.
Then the guy that was dreaming, not the narrator, not the guy cleaning the church, the guy who was dreaming about Pilgrim wakes up and then he has a big come to Jesus moment.
He goes to the church of the narrator.
Yeah,
but he is the narrator?
No.
He is the narrator.
No, this is the guy that the narrator is telling us about this guy falling asleep and dreaming about Pilgrim.
Because he had a dream about this guy.
Wait, no, he had a dream. Okay, here's how I took it. And where you can all we all compare the spinning top wiggled a little bit. No, we can all compare our fan theories. But no, I'm pretty sure he's telling us that when he was younger, he had this dream about Pilgrim And now he's an old guy who fucks his wife while people with cameras watch.
Unnecessary. Yeah, Thomas, thank you for actually getting it right. I really don't understand how this isn't clear. I mean, I know there's a lot of problems with this movie. I know that it's a weird little stream of vignettes. But like I said earlier, the narrator sequences are some of the most straightforward and well-structured of anything in this movie. So I don't understand how you guys so thoroughly missed it. Like, here, let me show you a couple clips to back up what's happening. It's quite obvious. The film starts with a dream. The narrator wakes up and tells his pilgrim statue and the audience that he dreamed a dream that he's had many times. So we know he has a recurring dream. And then later he starts telling the story about the first time he had this recurring dream to us in the church. And we listen to him, and that's the story. It's pretty straightforward, and I've seen a lot of little kids get it just fine. So, like, I gotta wonder if you guys were just not watching the movies very closely, or if you're just being intellectually dishonest.
The message is very clearly, kill yourself and go to heaven. Is it not?
Yep.
That's
That's certainly the analogy.
Yes, I have a question at the end of my notes about that I was hoping you guys had a different answer, but yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah, the only other one I could think of is like black people are the villain. No, that's not better. That's not any better.
Exactly.
There are two messages. Black people are villains and kill yourself. That's all I got from this.
Yeah, that's
all I got.
Okay. All right.
Still with the weird black guy thing. Guys, I am so curious to know why you thought it was a black guy. Please, if you're watching it, let me know. I'm very curious. Okay, now let's talk about the suicide thing. So, I think it's funny joking about how they commit suicide in the end. I have a dark sense of humor. I think it's funny talking about how all the kids die and drowned. It doesn't bother me. I don't even feel like that's, disingenuous the way that I feel like some of these criticisms were. Because I know that this is a joke. However, I do not think that all the fans of god-awful movies know that this is a joke. Because, well, to their credit, when I popped up and started interacting with this review and talking to people in the comments and answering questions, the god-awful movie people were nothing but polite. They even told their people, hey, be nice to this guy. He seems pretty cool, and I appreciate that. But man, some of the people that were responding were not very nice or cool. There was one guy just out there misrepresenting Christian ideas. He says, not only does the Bible not say suicide is wrong, it encourages it. The only reason Christians say suicide won't get you to heaven is because people, including children, in the real world literally kill themselves to get to heaven faster, and it makes Christianity look as evil as it actually is. If you care what the Bible says, here's what it actually tells you about suicide. And it gives you some verses, and I could go through and debunk all these, but that just sounds exhausting. This guy is just flat out wrong when he says the only reason Christians say suicide won't get you to heaven. Because I think that most Christians don't believe that suicide is some salvation-revoking mortal sin. I certainly don't believe that. Once you're saved, no sin will send you to hell. But yeah, if you look through these comments, they're just all very, very nasty. And now, mind you, I want you to know that these comments that are being written, they're not on the God-Awful Movies page. These are people that went over to my church's YouTube page where the Pilgrim's Progress film was listed and just started writing really nasty comments. For example, one person wrote, "It's a miracle that you could do this with $2,500. Thank you for giving to the Lord of your time and your money and your talent. God bless you. I enjoyed it." And then the same Eat Honey, Be Happy guy that was saying the Bible encourages suicide comes and says, "Lady of the Light, very well, they didn't have to pay their cast and crew. So if $2,500 for some cheap costumes is a miracle, then literally anything could be a miracle, rendering the word meaningless. Bad lessons and arguments like these contained within this story caused me to leave Christianity." Do you have to go write like a nasty reply to somebody who just enjoyed it? Like if you want to make a negative comment, whatever, especially if you want to make a negative comment on the God Awful Movies page. But coming to my church's page and like attacking these random sweet people that just enjoyed something, like, come on, man, lay off of them. Listen to this person. "Wow, wow, wow, what a wonderful movie. Definitely telling friends about this. I love the ongoing poetry. I love how it keeps to the biblical truth in a fun and entertaining way. Definitely worth the watch." And this Tommy Kiger guy comes in and just says, "Seriously? This is shit." That's pretty mean, guys. So, as I sort of wind down this review, I just want to give a little bit of constructive criticism to the guys behind God Awful Movies. As I said earlier, I love Say Goodnight Kevin and Red Letter Media. I love mocking and making fun of bad Christian movies, and I truly was honored and excited to have it done to me. And I've had a lot of fun listening to it. I'm very glad that they did it. I have had a lot of fun making this review, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people. At the same time, it's not what I was hoping it would be. I feel like the humor is not entirely intellectually honest. And I don't think that the God Awful Movies guys are doing that out of some kind of malice. I don't think they're like trying to lie. I think they're just trying really hard to always be funny and make fun of every aspect of a movie and come up with lots of jokes. And in doing so, they kind of sacrifice the truth, which is okay when you have the actual movie there being like, okay, this is just a joke that these guys are saying. When we can see the clip and they're making fun of something, you're like, okay, they're exaggerating. But in podcast form, when no one has seen these movies for the most part, it comes off as disingenuous, and I think that's a problem. And I kind of think that because it's disingenuous, and then also because it's pretty mean-spirited. I mean, like I said, they were great about warning their fans, hey, be nice to this guy, he's interacting with us, don't be a dick to him. I totally appreciate that. But there is a little bit of a nasty, mean-spirited tone to a lot of it. I mean, for example, Say Goodnight Kevin and Red Letter Media, who review bad films, and in the case of Say Goodnight Kevin, specifically bad Christian films all the time, they will often say positive things about films. I think the only actual positive thing said here was that the scenery was nice in at one point. And I mean, if the only way you could say that it wasn't is to be an outright liar. Oregon is beautiful. And so I think when you combine the fact that it's all negative and all mean, and there's never like, yeah, that was cute, yeah, they did a good job with that, it just starts to seem really mean-spirited. And that's fine. I enjoy mean-spirited humor a lot, but I do think that it fosters a fairly negative attitude in the fan base, as evidenced by the people that were just going out of their way to attack folks. It's like, oh man, are these God Awful Movies fans or these Star Wars fans? What is going on here? And to a large degree, I don't think that the behavior of their fans should be blamed on the podcast creators, but it wouldn't hurt to be a little bit more forthright and honest as you're doing the reviews. And if you're here, whether you're the God Awful Movies guys or someone listening and you're thinking, oh, are you really being fair? Like, people know they're joking. I don't think they do. For example, we had this one guy, he said, here's what this guy wrote. This is so fascinating to me. This guy, Zach, commented, "This episode was triggering. I haven't thought about this movie in years, and I could literally remember every scene the guys described." No, Zach, you do not remember this film, and you do not remember all the scenes that these guys describe. This it really cracks me up. As best I can tell, it says on his Facebook page, he was in school from 2015 to 2019. So, no, this guy in his mid-20s did not see this children's film that came out 2 years ago. He's acting like this is something that he, saw as a kid and blah, blah, blah. It triggered him, brought back memories. I mean, I guess he could be confusing it with another Pilgrim's Progress film, but that would be pretty weird because this is a very specific musical adaptation of it. So I don't really know how you would have seen, say, the 2008 version, which is not at all musical and is very somber and is completely modernized. I don't see how you could really be confusing these two things. So it's almost like the just general disingenuousness of the God Awful Movies review. It's like it's fostering these false memories and just blatant inaccuracies in people. And, do we really want that? I think we're better than that, guys. Noah and Eli and Thomas and whoever else works on this podcast with you guys, thanks for doing this. If I can offer you any bit of constructive criticism, it would just be a little bit more accurate in how you describe movies. Don't just set out trying to kind of mean-spiritedly make it out that all these filmmakers are more inept than they really are. You can have a lot of fun bashing on Christian movies, while still recognizing the occasional good part of them. So thank you for doing this. I hope you guys get a chance to see this. I may well go and watch more of your podcasts in the future. I do believe I had seen maybe a God's Not Dead episode in the past or something. And I think maybe even then it was kind of just a little bit mean-spirited, just unrelentingly negative aspect of it that kept me away from it. But I do want to watch a couple more of them. I know I saw that you guys are doing The Reliant recently, which I want to see. I've met Paul Munger, the director of that movie. He's a really nice guy, good family man, but I do think that he's not the best filmmaker. And like the movie he did before that, Princess Cut, is one of the most bonkers, insane things I've ever seen. Has one of the most inadvertently awful messages I've ever seen in a Christian film. A message that makes me, a very morally traditional and conservative guy, feel like a feminist because it's just so bad. So I really like to watch The Reliant. Out of curiosity, it's a movie that'll appeal to me because the guns and stuff. So I'm curious to see if it's any good at all or how bad it is. And then I'm really curious to see what the God Awful Movies take on it is, and if there's any inaccuracies with them making fun of the gun stuff in the movie. So that could be fun. I might do another episode like this if this one is successful. So, all right, everybody, this has turned into a very long episode. I'm sorry for that, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. And, of course, don't forget that you can watch the entire Pilgrim's Progress film, linked to in the comments, and also the God Awful Movies podcast about it, linked to in the comments. So if you really enjoyed this, you have another 3+ hours of content to go and watch. But anyway, take care. Hope you all are having a great week, and stay tuned for more Buck the System episodes coming very soon.